The entrance led to an open hall, with banners hung on every wall, rich cloth of purple, red, and white flickering in the hearthlight glow, all bearing in fine gold thread a device emblazoned in bold relief, the two curves of a heart shape, cracked into separate parts, yet connected at the bottom tip, where a drop of blood appeared to drip, a tear of gold forever falling, yet ever still in the threaded drawing. As he stared, suddenly he felt a tear upon his own cheek appear, breaking through a neutral pose before he could fully compose his thought. Turning to the fireplace in earnest, he wiped his tear, pace quickening, clutching frozen hands as the hearth's white cold brands seemed to warp the air, a molten flame of doubtful source he could not name. Clench-fisted, he passed row upon row of benches, bathed in the glow of fire, with long tables richly laid as if a feast were made for kings, topped with ivory cream cloth, glazed orange in the muted gleam, on which spread places of silver plate, of rare design and ancient date, the image of the wounded heart stamped upon every part. Along with this was set more drink and delicate fare than he could think of, earthen cups with hot spiced milk, steaming sweet cinnamon, silk smooth, cups of butter, and purest clover honey of burnished gold, spilling over warm, thick slices of bread still steaming, springy white crumbs spread with cream, candies soft of taste both tart and sweet, jellies laced with nectar, purpled grape, and pear crystalline moist with aroma rare, the dark red morsels of cherry and crunchy seeds of blackberry tumbling over rich white cakes, or spooned into crisp light pastry. Despite the banquet spread before him, he continued straight ahead, unswerving, to warm hands scarred through countless lands. However, there, kneeling upon the stone, he noted feeling no warmth at all, only the pale firelight burning like the weak twilight of cold mornings, when the early sun crawls up the sky and cannot run to dance on faces of shivering forms, and light the land it never warms. He recalled tales of fairy fire, heatless flame never to expire, burning for centuries, as old and bright as the moon and just as cold. Bringing his hand toward the flame, to sensations strange to name, he shivered, but with a pleasant tingling over his skin, like soft nettles stinging, fastened to every pore, filling him with images he traced with willing distraction, sensing the force that fairy art drew from mortal life, how airy desire in the unquiet mind, once with fairy glamour combined, grew to such force that it never faded, but seemed to live forever, where unfulfilled dreams consumed themselves in gleams, unending. His hand, thus in frozen light, in sensuous waves the delight of kisses soft came to him, damp under lips trembling. Grasping hands, hips arching, mouths swirled in wordless love, clutching from behind and above, faces hunger and the heat of eyes, the curve of breast and slow thighs urgent stretching, the swell of wild cries muffled in jaws' mild suckling, press of tongue and hair mingling pleasure into despair, graveyards of nameless desire burning in unquenchable fire, his fingers numb, turning between repulsion and painful yearning. He wrenched his hand from the flame, the images gone as quick as they came. As he rose and turned, he found a large shimmering book, bound in a supple leather and gold thread, wonderful to behold, suffused with a glamour like rainbows, glimmering in blue-green, yellow, and rose tinctures that hovered over and swirled into clear, white beams curled along its blank face, with no sign on its dark cover or spine. Gazing with admiration, while still wary of the potential guile, within its obvious power, or anywhere else inside the tower walls. He brushed its silver clasp that, in his uncertain grasp, prickled skin with fairy light rising to the touch, swelling bright across the open hand, which glowed a ruddy pink as pale shafts showed through the cracks of fingers closed, cleaving like water through the enclosed hand. Unbuckling the clasp, he lay the book open, which continued to stay under the dappled swirl of light, coiling into luminous white bursts. Its runes he did not read, for he feared the vaguely legible markings that once peered into might hold such power to seduce, that he wondered what oaths might loose their hold upon a weakened heart, or sworn oath break apart to imperil the fate of his trial with false doubt or true-seeming guile. As he chanced upon a page, he started back with disbelief and grim-hearted eyes, for scarcely could he believe true what the ancient pen drew so long ago, wondering what eye or heart could so brush by the veil of ages to show the fate of men, as if it had long since been completed. He chanced upon the thought that the elusive prize he sought was long since found in a prophet's hand of foreign tongue and faraway land, mocking the toil of his old quest with images of the present foretold in faded pictures, and the pages writing like echoes of forgotten ages, and all for which had been fought and lost, years and blood of unknown cost, uncountable deeds after and before the lives of Arthur, Gawain, Pellinore, and kingdoms from the fall of Rome laid forth throughout the tome, not like the traces of recollection or history, but like fiction dreamt in prophecy, instead in visions out of the long-dead past. Thus he froze before the view of which he'd heard but never knew for certain, of the dolorous stroke that smote the earth and broke its core. As fingers brushed the cold parchment, they flinched against its old image, hard to the touch, as stone-high vaulted that framed the page's scene, like a sky of darkening, washed black with a shade of blue, where flecks of white played and glimmered like starry beams, piercing the shadow, with gleams from afar. Beneath this ceiling hung yards of black velvet, strung in braided threads of gold embellishment, each pleat and fold caught in endless knots, where a single line twisted and coiled with grace so fine that no eye could trace each bend and subtle curve from start to end. Beneath this image of the night sky lay a table covered in a white cloth of loose, spare threads, simple and worn, yellowed from age, with places torn that draped a glowing light concealed underneath, after years still unrevealed, beams strong under its frayed edges, inspiring the solemn pledges of honor to seek its nourishing source by faith, knowledge, and virtuous force. Close to the table that kept the grail faced two forms in heavy mail, one regal, crowned with gold, purple silk, draped round warrior's flanks and polished breastplate, a commanding presence to test the loyalty of subjects to his will. But as the form stood still in shock, his kingly eyes observed his foe in surprise, for as he lowered his royal sword in reverence of the grail, the Lord beheld a driving form whose hate consumed all blessing and regal state, his stare bloody with an air of vengeance, betraying despair undeterred from its course, blind to shame, pity, or remorse. High in his hand a spear so fierce that the grievous wounds it could pierce would prove so bitter and so sore that no magic or healing art could restore them, aiming the shaft's razored point at the other's exposed joint at the hip. The figure stood in the picture's frame, suspended, lance held forever the same, despite its lifelike form. and bloody eye, frozen in time long gone by. Behind the image of that deed on the next page, the scent of mead wine drifted, as if from a covered pot simmering over burning hot coals. As he hovered over the book, the page's sweet fragrance took away his senses. Eyes shut, breathing deep, muted sighs, he savored the spiced, warm scent of fruit blossom and the ease that went through him, aromas that began to make his mouth water and stomach ache, his lips inching forward to meet the rich, warm, sweet flavors. But as he reached out to taste the fragrant sheet that faced him, he found its true flavor as bland and arid as dust or grains of sand. Opening his eyes instead to look upon the picture the magic book contained, his gaze was beguiled with the image of a lady and child drinking cups of the heady brew, whose bubbling scent slowly grew over a hearthstone's crimson glows, whose shadows seemed to enclose their kneeling forms. Carved into an oak bed behind them, a lady frozen from foot to head stood yearning by a riverbank, while her toes into the earth sank, bark sprouting on her limbs and face, holding the twisted form in place. Turning to another sheet, he felt a still greater heat, much like that of the room he viewed on the page. A multi-hued fire before a tall, elegant bed, where a youthful knight lay his head, his loose brown locks played with, where a lady overtopped the frayed bedclothes seized and held his wrist by his head, capturing fists stronger than those of many lands' champions in her fragile hands. Straddling over his prostrate form, she soothed his brow with kisses warm, clutching him in her generous thighs, whispering broken moans and sighs from full pink lips, soft as thought, in whose spell his ears were caught, the curve of her breast in the disarray of green silk, dangling as he lay unsure. Without a direct glance at the noble lady's bold advance, muscles tense under his sleeping gown. As it stretched from his chest, clinging down arched flanks twisted aside, torn between lust and knightly pride. Turning the page yet once more, he marveled to find his own image before a pair of fluttering birds. Close embraced, a great hawk's talons tightly laced into a white dove's belly and head, its broad-arched wings wide overspread, speckled glorious in the dwindling light in hues of brown, gold, and white. Richly feathered, triumphal proud, stern eye and daggered beak bowed over the trembling body of its prey, heedless of its frailty or dismay. Viewing his own expressionless glance in the picture and his frozen, impassive stance, he recalled the fierce instant of the act, the force one held the other lacked, the ferocity of the form above, and the helplessness of the wounded dove below, its fragile wings so soon laid low, as the hot gauze trickled flow released its pain with bloody stain on cold and barren snow.